Well, dear folklore friends, first of all, I wish to thank the Belief Narrative Network most sincerely for the great privilege of presenting this lecture. I especially thank Professor Miriam Mencage, the former chairperson, and Dr. Judith Kishalas, the present chairperson, and also, of course, Eva Thordis Iceland for her most excellent and first-class technical support. And now I extend to you all a very warm welcome to come with me to a rural district in southwest Wales, where the villages of Myddfai and Llanddeusant are situated. Now, nearby on Mynydd Du, Black Mountain, there is an enchanting lake known as Llyn y Fan Fach. Llyn, lake, Fan, peak, Fach, small or little. Well, I also invite you to come with me as far back in time as the 12th century and listen to a legend from Wales translated into English. And here's the legend. The princes of South Wales had been fighting hard to preserve the independence of their country, independence of Wales against English aggression. And during that time, in the 12th century, there lived at Blaen Sawdde farm in Llanddeusant a widow whose husband had been killed in one of those violent battles. One day, her only son was tending the cattle on the banks of Llyn y Fan Fach lake, and he saw a most beautiful maiden sitting on the surface of the water, combing her hair. The youth continued to hold out his hand towards the maiden and offered her his barley bread. But she said in a rhyming couplet, "Cras dy fara, nid hawdd fy nala, hard is your bread, 'tis not easy to catch me." Then she sank into the water. The love-stricken youth returned home, and his mother advised him to take moist bread with him the next day. After he had waited for many, many hours, the maiden appeared. He once more offered her his bread, but she said, "Llaeth dy fara, ti ni fyna, moist is thy bread, I do not want thee." Smiling, she vanished. The mother then suggested slightly baked bread, and the following day the young man again waited and waited. But as the sun was almost setting and he was on the point of going home, he cast a sad and last farewell look over the lake, when, to his astonishment, he saw cattle walking on the surface of the water, followed by the maiden. This time she accepted the bread and consented to be his wife, but on one condition. "If you strike me 3 times without a cause," she said to him, "I will leave you forever." Suddenly, the maiden plunged into the water, and after a short while, a strongly built, hoary-headed man came out of the lake with 2 beautiful, completely identical girls. And the hoary-headed man said, "I will give you my daughter in marriage if you can tell me which one of these 2 girls you love." The girls were so alike that the youth was on the point of saying he could not, when the one with a star on her sandal thrust her foot forward just a little, and he pointed to the girl he loved. "You have chosen rightly," said her father. "I will give her as a dowry as many sheep, cattle, goats, and horses as she can count of each with one breath. Then she began counting as rapidly as she could, by fives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the exact number of animals tallied each time came out of the lake. Now the young couple were married and lived happily in great prosperity for many, many years on the nearby farm of Esgair Llaethdy in Myddfai. Esgair, mountain land, Llaethdy, dairy. They had 3 sons. One day, the couple attended the christening ceremony of a new baby in the neighborhood. The husband told his wife to fetch a pony from the field, and he went to the house for her gloves. When he returned, she was still standing in the same place, and the husband tapped her playfully on the shoulder with one of the gloves and said, "Go, go, go." And it was then she reminded him of the 3 blows without a cause and warned him to be careful. Sometime later, they were at a wedding when the wife suddenly burst into tears. Her husband again tapped her on the shoulder and asked her, why was she weeping? And she answered, "I weep because the young couple's troubles are now beginning, and so are ours, for this is a second causeless blow." The years passed by, but at a funeral one day, the wife began to laugh most gaily. Touching her arm, her husband urged her to be quiet, but she replied, "When people die, their troubles are over, and so, dear husband, is our marriage. This is the 3rd causeless blow, for farewell forever." She walked towards Esgair Llaethdy, their home, and called her cattle and all the other animals by their names. Mi Wlfrech, Moelfrech, mi Olfrech, Gwynfrech, Pedair Cai, Tonfrech, yr hen wynebwen, a'r las Geingen. Brindled cow, hornless, speckled cow, spotted cow, white-freckled, the 4-field sword mottled, the old white face, and the grey Geingen, with a white bull from the king's court, and the little black calf suspended on the hook. You too, come home quickly. The 4 oxen that are on the field, you also, swiftly come home. All the cattle followed her, even the little black calf, though slaughtered and hung upon a hook. 4 oxen ploughing in the field on the mountainside were also called, and they dragged the plough with them, making a deep furrow, a furrow which, it is said, remains to this day. Led by the lady, all the animals disappeared into the Van Fach lake. The husband was broken-hearted, and the sons wandered long, searching for their mother. But one day, at a mountain gate near Dol Hywel, a gate still called today Llydiart y Meddygon, the physician's gate, the mother suddenly appeared to Rhiwallon, her eldest son, and told him that his mission on earth was to heal the sick, and she gave him a bag full of medical prescriptions. On several occasions later, she met her 3 sons on the banks of the lake. And once she even accompanied them on their return home as far as a place still called today Pant y Meddygon, the physician's dingle, where she revealed to them the medicinal qualities of various plants and herbs. Now Rhiwallon and his 3 sons, Cadogan, Gruffydd and Einion, became physicians to Prince Rhys Grig, Lord of Dinevor, who gave them lands and privileges. They and their children wrote down their knowledge in manuscripts, and their fame as physicians soon spread throughout the whole country, and it has continued among their descendants to this day. Well, that's the legend. I have just been retelling one of the most well-known and best loved of all Welsh folk narratives. The legend was first recorded in print in a very brief version in 1821, and in a fuller version only as recently as 1861. Since then, it has been included in almost every published collection of Welsh folk tales for adults and children, often with illustrations. It has been the subject of paintings, films, exhibitions, and an opera, The Doctor of Myddfai. And by today, I should say, by today, the most attractive narrative genres in Wales are brief jokes and anecdotes related in an informal day-to-day context. Yet, the Llyn Fan Fach legend, with its emphasis on magic, the supernatural, and the other world, is as popular as ever. Legends are born and legends die. Some narratives, once they are recorded in print, or even before, seem to lose their sense of immediacy. They have little relevance to modern day life and fade into obscurity. Now, others, however, like a good folk song or a good wine, become even more precious as the years go by. The question is, why? Why is the legend of Llyn Fan Fach so enduring? What has it meant to people of all ages, from one generation to the other? Why is its message relevant to us today? Well, in seeking to answer these questions, I present the following 3 main considerations, and they are considerations. You're very welcome to disagree with me, but here are the 3 reasons. 3 considerations. First, the legend gives pleasure because of its form and aesthetic qualities. Although the first full printed version is somewhat static and flowery in style, it has all the ingredients of a good story. In form and pattern, it well reflects the storyteller's art. For example, the use of rhyme, what the scholars would call cante fable, and the use of rhythm to express the maiden's response to the youth's offer of bread has an important mnemonic function. Cras dy fara ti ni byna. And this helps, the mnemonic function helps the listener to grasp the significance of the words. And a similar function is performed with the use of rhyme in the cattle call run. Now, interesting use is also made in this legend of formulaic numbers and patterns, and of what the Danish scholar Axel Ulrich called the epic laws of folk narrative. It opens with a reference to the only son of a widow whose husband had been killed fighting for his country. Now the legend, therefore, immediately gains our sympathy, a feeling. In many folk narratives, two characters are either completely different or exactly identical. And here we have another law. In the Llyn Fan Fach legend, we encounter the law of similarity with the introduction of the recognition motif. The two sisters who are almost identical. And similarly, we notice the law of contradictions when the wife cries at a wedding and laughs at a funeral. Much use is also made in the legend of the formulaic number 3. For 3 days, the youth waits to meet the lake maiden. He offers her 3 kinds of bread. When they marry, 3 sons are born. And Rhiwallon, the eldest, also has 3 sons. The fairy wife must not be struck 3 blows without a cause, but 3 times this occurs, and during 3 crucial occasions in man's rites of passage, namely birth, marriage, and death. That's the first reason. The second reason, I call this the fusion of history and tradition. History and tradition come together. The storyteller's art is evident also in the legend's structure. From the 14th century onwards, the fame of the Meddai physicians is well attested in Welsh literature. Yet there is no version of the narrative connecting them with fairy descent prior to the written version published in 1821 and 1861. What we have here, therefore, is an interesting example of the interaction of tradition and history. The narrative is a fusion of 2 local legends. The first is an early lake legend based on the central motif of the fairy water maiden marrying a mortal man. Now the second is a much later legend based on medical associations and onomastic traditions relating to local place names centered around the physicians of Meddai. The fairy water bride theme is but one version of a very popular migratory legend, ML 5090, the motif married to a fairy woman. And there are a number of similar narratives connected with various other lakes in Wales. On the other hand, the onomastic legend associated with the water bride's descendants, the physicians of Meddai, does not exist as an independent tale in Welsh tradition. And this is the only known version. It seems, therefore, that the earlier lake legend and the much later onomastic traditions relating to the physicians were combined by the introduction of 3 well-attested related motifs, namely, gifted descendant of fairy mortal marriage, fairy mother bestows magic power upon half mortal son, and thirdly, fairy mother returns to visit son. And another point, I think an important point, giving the renowned physicians a mother of supernatural origin was one means in people's mind of explaining the source of their great wisdom and remarkable powers of healing. Now, the addition of these motifs has greatly enhanced the legend and given it a new meaning. The various other versions of the early lake legend end tragically with a fairy wife returning to the lake. It is the end of the story. The wisdom and knowledge the fairy mother imparted to the physicians of Motherby, however, was to benefit mankind for generations to come. So what we have here is a story without an end. Local tradition firmly testifies to the belief that certain farms in Motherby parish today once belonged to the physicians. Llwyn Ifan Feddig, the grove of Ifan the physician, Llwyn Maredydd Feddig, the grove of Maredydd the physician, and Esgair Llaethdy, the dairy mountain land, where the youth and the lake maiden went to live. Now, the onomastic element, as you've noticed in the last name, is very obvious. Esgair Llaethdy, the dairy mountain land, because the last name reminds us of the fairy cattle, and their offspring brought the couple great prosperity. Furthermore, it should be noted that the Llyn Fan Fach legend is much more than just a story. For example, it also opens a fascinating door on our historical past. In content and atmosphere, it takes the listener a long way back in history, possibly as far as the Iron Age. The cattle described, for instance, are, according to a former colleague of mine in the museum, Francis Payne, an authority on the plough and cattle. According to Francis Payne, the cattle described are similar to those which existed in Britain between the Iron Age and the Dark Ages. Well, the Llyn Fan Fach legend, therefore, is most memorable, first, because of its form and the storyteller's art. Secondly, because of its structure and fusion of history and tradition. And now we come to the third reason. Thirdly, the narrative has endured because it has the most important and meaningful message for us today. It is, in my opinion, a symbolic presentation of the story of men and women throughout the ages. It reflects their fears and aspirations, and above all, their constant fascination with the mystery of life and death. That is the great paradox of living in this world and yet longing for another. One moment, their feet are firmly based on the ground. The next moment, they are not. Now there is sadness, then there is joy. Now nothing seems to be possible, then nothing seems to be impossible. The world of magic becomes a reality. In discussing this third reason, I will refer in particular to four words or concepts. First word, and one of my favorites, is the Greek word pleroma, P-L-E-R-O-M-A, fulfillment, complete, incompatible joy. Some years ago, I well remember at the end of a very wonderful day of recording, one of my elderly informants, a very kind lady, she shared with me for the first time the saying, "Keep an olive branch in your heart." and the birds will return to sing. Keep an olive branch. And in our daily lives, when there is grief and suffering, men and women have long desired to experience, even for a short while, those everlasting moments of complete joy, when time itself seems to stand still. And we too long to hear the wonderful song of birds. You will remember that the Llyn y Fan Bach legend also opens with a reference to grief and suffering. The father has been killed, and the young man from Blaensauthe, the only son of a widow, is one morning tending his mother's cattle along the banks of a small mountain lake. Everyone who has visited this secluded lake on Mynydŷ, the Black Mountain, will know something of its peace and tranquility. You are there, and yet you are not there, as if there was some truth in the ancient belief that water, where life began, and lakes in particular, Llyn y Fan Bach included, was a doorway to the other world. The youth is tending his mother's cattle on the banks of the lake, a task he has attended many times before. It is not every day we experience that which is out of the ordinary. He is there amidst the peace of the Carmarthenshire beacons, as if waiting. And there she is, a strikingly beautiful woman, sitting on the surface of the water, combing her hair. A strange vision indeed. But the young man's reaction is quite natural. He acts as men and women have always reacted in such circumstances, or at least I should say would wish to react if they had the courage. He offers her his hand, offers her bread, and from that moment, that very moment, the listener is witness to a drama which characterizes this legend from beginning to end. A drama, namely the interaction between the natural and the supernatural, the rational and the irrational. The youth's one object is to win the affection of this lovely maiden. But the path is not easy, and at first he does not succeed. But the youth of Blaensauthe represent men and women in all ages. There is more to a human being than mere flesh and blood. Men and women have a mind of their own, and they will at times reach for the stars. They can and will occasionally be able to rise as a phoenix from the ashes to be born anew. Although faced with the possibility of failure and ever conscious of the fear of the unknown, their greatest desire is to see, to visualize as they have never seen before, and to experience love and the wonder and joy of life. Now, this legend also symbolizes men and women's perseverance in their constant search for fulfillment, what I mentioned, pleroma, fulfillment. Their motto is nil disperandum. We will not give up. During the second and third day in the Llyn y Fan Bach tale, the youth had to wait for a very long time before he actually saw the maiden again. He had to offer her 3 kinds of bread. And then, when he thinks that he has achieved his goal, he still has to accomplish another task. He must distinguish between 2 identical sisters. But men Man's perseverance and dedication will eventually be rewarded. When the sun was almost setting on the third day, and the young man was on the point of returning home, the Lady of the Lake appears. When the youth is unable to distinguish between the two sisters and is just on the point of giving up, the maiden he loves thrusts her foot forward just a little, and it is then that he notices the star on her sandal. It is merely a star, but one star can have a far-reaching effect. I should say here that the wife is never regarded as a fairy, but she counted in fives, as the fairies did. If, however, the lake maiden was a fairy, she was no ordinary one. The fairies were usually very small and dainty, but the Llyn Fan Fach maiden, on the other hand, was a dignified, fully grown woman. She reminds us of a female deity, Rhiannon, queen of Annwn, the underworld, in the Mabinogion. And you've heard of the Mabinogion, I'm sure, the classic collection of Welsh medieval tales, Mabinogion. Also, she reminds us of Epona, horse goddess, and Freya, Germanic goddess of life and fertility. But although the maiden came to the life of the Myddfai youth from a supernatural world beyond the water, she also had all the qualities and characteristics of a woman, and that accounts much for the legend's appeal. According to one popular verse, Myddfai parish was celebrated for its beautiful girls. But of all the beautiful girls the Myddfai youth had ever seen, none was so beautiful as the maiden from the lake. She belongs, therefore, to a world of superlatives. She was the personification of all ultimate good, summum bonum. She gave to the widow's son everything he had ever desired: love, children, prosperity, and joy. His fulfillment was complete. Pleroma, the first word, and the second word, destiny. The Irish poet, Saint Columba, once said, "If poets' verses be but stories, so be food and raiment stories. So is all the world a story, so is man of dust a story." If the Llyn Fan Fach legend reminds us of the Greek word pleroma, total fulfillment, it also reminds us of the Aristotelian requirements for tragedy, namely to evoke fear and pity in the viewer. The legend celebrates man's achievements, but at the same time it signifies his failings and fragility. We are born to die, ashes to ashes, and we live on borrowed time, pro tempore. Although the fairy mother returns to see her children, nothing more is told about the father. It is as if he has been destined to die. Many of the fairy narratives also remind us of a certain code of conduct which had to be respected. The husband in the Llyn Fan Fach legend also broke an ethical code which was not on no account to be infringed. He was not to strike his wife 3 causeless blows, and these were taboos he did not or could not respect. The legend, therefore, in this sense, is a cautionary legend, Frevel Sage. It is a sermon in miniature. And now we come to the third and fourth words: relevance and continuity. Finally, therefore, the Llyn Fan Fach legend gives us pleasure today also because of its relevance to us in the 20th century. It is a legend which takes us on a fascinating journey to the distant past, but it is also a story without an end, a story which transcends time. The various other versions of the fairy water bride legend in Wales end tragically. The wife returns to the lake with her animals. No more is heard of them. It is the end of the story. In the Llyn y Fan Fach legend, however, in that version, the fairy wife not only revisits her sons to comfort them in their sorrow, and every man and woman needs such comfort, she also reveals to them the secrets of plants and herbs. She gave to her children wisdom and knowledge that was to benefit mankind for generations to come. The legend, therefore, ends on a triumphant note. But in one sense, there is no end. In the midst of death, there is life. Some of the magic and goodness of the woman from the mountain lake is reenacted in her own children and her children's children in this world. The circle is complete, and the story continues. For over 800 years, right up to our own day, the memory of the physicians was kept alive in the Milfai district. And in the 1950s, for example, the farmer of Esgair Lleidy, where the young couple went to live, called some of his cattle by the names recorded in the legend. And today, the Llyn y Fan Fach legend is beautifully portrayed in a special stained glass window in the Milfai Community Hall. And by the way, it was unveiled by Prince Charles in July 2017. And in the hall, too, there are exhibits relating to medicinal plants and folk medicine. Exhibits relating to medicinal plants and folk medicine. For many years, interest in herbal plants and folk medicine has been very evident in the Milfai area. For example, in 1967, when I first visited Llwyn Maredydd, formerly known as Llwyn Maredydd Feddyg, the grove of Maredydd, the physicians, the family then, they were very proud of their herbal garden, said to have belonged to one of the physicians. And the long tradition of practicing medicine in Milfai and the surrounding district also is still thriving today. Furthermore, various historians and doctors, including Dr. Donald Williams Swansea, a former consultant psychiatrist, now believe that more than one of the present-day medical practitioners and consultants from this area could well be distant descendants of the renowned physicians mentioned in the legend. Since 2011, a very successful one-day annual conference has been held in Milfai. And in 2014, a society, the Physicians of Milfai Society, Cymdeithas Meddygon Milfai, was formed. And in 2018, the first volume of the Transactions of the Physicians of Milfai Society was published, edited by Robin Barlow. In addition to the conference, members of the society attend an annual service at St. Luke's Church, Milfai, held on the closest Sunday to the 18th of October. The date, as you will gather, the date of St. Luke's festival, patron saint of physicians and artists. The society also organised visits to Ffynnon y Meddygon, the physician's well on Milfai Mountain, Mynydd Milfai. Now, Llyn y Fan Fach is a lake which has enchanted people through the ages. By introducing her children to the virtues of medicinal plants, the fairy wife continued her service for the welfare of society. People believed, or wished to believe, that the maiden still presided in the lake, a source of guidance and inspiration. When she left her mortal husband, she merely returned to the kingdom from whence she came, her home and her people's home, the land beneath the waves. During the 19th century in particular, scores of people visited Llyn y Fan Fach every year on the first day in August, and especially on the first Sunday or Monday of that month, which signaled the coming of the Lady of the Lake, or the Maiden of the Lake. And today, people continue to make the pleasant journey up the mountain to the lake. Mainly these days, I confess, for its beauty. But because the version of the legend we have been discussing has a meaningful message to people of all ages, they can identify themselves with the main characters, because there is something of the young man of Myddfa in all of us. To quote one of my informants from North Wales, "We are the fairy's children," she told me. "We are the children of the fairy lady of the lake, continually searching for her." The maiden has long returned to her home beneath the waves. Mortal men and women will never see her again with human eyes. But in our search for her, with our eyes of faith and imagination, in our dreams, in our waiting, in our perseverance to fulfill our deepest aspirations, we too, mortal men and women, like the only son of a widow from Myddfa, may catch a glimpse of her, as beautiful and as enchanting as ever before, sitting on the surface of the waters of a mountain lake, combing her hair. This narrative, therefore, is more than just another story, just another folk tradition. It is a living legend which has the most meaningful and important message for us today, for all of us today. To enjoy health is one of the greatest blessings for all people in every country. And doctors and all who care for our well-being must be regarded as indispensable benefactors of mankind. And for that reason alone, the legend of a fairy wife from a Welsh mountain lake and the mother and grandmother of a renowned family of physicians is a legend that does not merely belong to folklore archives of yesterday. In a world of wars and suffering, it is a legend that just with a message which needs to be shared today with all people more than ever, needs to be shared. And that is why I end this talk by venturing to offer you, as folk narrative scholars, an additional Latin term which we could perhaps adopt. Consider adopting, and the emphasis there is on the word consider. We talk, don't we, of Homo sapiens, the knowing human being. We occasionally use the term Homo narrans, the storytelling human being, a valuable term first introduced, I believe, by the German scholar Kurt Ranke. Now, the additional term I suggest is Homo praedicast, Praedicast, Homo praedicast, the proclaiming human being, the predicant, the preacher, the teacher, the one who shares with the people a most inspirational, elevating message relevant to all ages. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, is a great privilege you have given me today to share with you, my folklore friends from many parts of the world, a legend and message which has stood the test of time. And at the end like this, my wish is that you too will enjoy the very best of health and every blessing. As I say in Welsh, can mil diolch, 100,000 Thanks.